Hello, everybody. Scott McMeans once again with Legacy Leaders. I am so happy today. We have Amy Weber from Vetta Sales Consulting. We're going to talk a lot about what it's like to be a sales consultant, but we're really going to talk about her story and how she got there to be at the head of the sales consulting world. So, Amy, the microphone and camera are yours. Please introduce yourself and let everybody know how you got here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. First of all, thank you for inviting me onto the podcast. I appreciate that. And secondly, I love to tell the story. It's a really interesting perspective. So I spent about 30 years in tech sales, working for some names that people may have heard of before: Microsoft, McAfee, Twilio, Cisco, just little companies.
Small ones, yeah.
And and after all that time, in 2024, I had taken a sabbatical and trying to really decide what I wanted to do next. And so I took a step back and I thought about all the aspects of what I had done as both an IC and a leader through all the years, and decided to launch my own consulting organization, Vetta. And so Vetta was born in 2024. It's a fledgling organization, but we have seen some success. Initially, I started out really focused on just sales, but it's grown beyond that. And through the partnership with Aptive Index, which is a database scientific assessment tool, I go into organizations and I really create a baseline for people, not just from how they're going to generate their go-to-market, but how we hire, create managers, and build leaders in organizations today. And we do that really from the data and from who you are. And then from there, we can turn over that tool to those organizations. We can continue with coaching, um, on a weekly or biweekly basis. And we can also go out and create strategy, not just for their sales organization, but for operations and enablement and um,
I love
anyone
it.
in between. And so it's a really fantastic opportunity to just take all of the knowledge that I've built over the last several decades and filter it into this new venture.
Well, what I remember from our previous conversation, this is really good dovetail into it. What you guys do, or what you're doing at Veta, is more than just sales consulting, as you said. It's the way I wrote this down. You're finding not only the right people to be on the bus, but you're making sure the right people are in the right spots because your tool actually analyzes somebody's personality and their traits and what they like and don't like, and kind of gives them a, for lack of a better word, a persona that is fit into specific jobs, right?
100%.
If I remember
So
right, you had icons. There was a wolf, there's an eagle, there are different icons that kind of identify this is your personality. That personality is probably not best suited for sales, but you're really good at this or whatever. So walk us through the thought process and how Veta works.
yeah, absolutely. Like I said, when I first started out, I was just working with clients on go-to-market strategy and going out and figuring out kind of everything from startups to enterprise organizations where they were lacking. And what we determined in some of the work that we were doing is that they might have the right strategy. They had the wrong people, or they had the
Mhm.
wrong people in the wrong roles. And
Yeah.
so through some of my associations and through a leadership organization I'm a part of, I got to meet Jason Carroll, who's the CEO of Aptive, and we created this partnership. And I went out and started building Aptive, his organization, into what Veta is doing. Veta is more than a personality test. It is, a client of mine the other day said it was the DISC assessment on steroids, which made me laugh. But it really helps you determine what your core identity is. We can, and a lot of people do, change who they are in the workplace, but you can't change your core skills.
Mhm.
And when we measure, we're not measuring, are you an extrovert or are you introvert? We're measuring, are you really driven to help people, to drive direction, to be a leader, or are you more of a collaborator or more of a team player, right? We drive, are you driven by social interactions or do they just exhaust you? Doesn't mean you can't be outgoing. One of my favorite extroverted introverts I know is a phenomenal public speaker, but once he gets done with that, he really just needs to be quiet for a while because it just completely drains his energy. And then we
Yeah.
look at there's four main categories and then there's additional categories after that. But what we do, we put you into roles and determine kind of where you fit. The irony is this: there are a lot of people who studied in school or got jobs early on in their career and have just stayed the course because they didn't want to rock the boat or because they felt like that. That was the decision they made early on, and they couldn't make that pivot
Yeah.
or that change. And they're either A, miserable and
Hmm.
go to work every day, which we spend more time at work than we do anywhere else, right?
Yeah.
So they're miserable, or they are failing at it. Um, you know, and that's
Well,
true whether they're in, you know, there's a great story of one of the people that I did the assessment with that he had taken a couple of leadership roles and he's back to being an IC, an individual contributor. And when I tested him, his desire to lead was so far over the collaboration. I mean, he could have fallen off the scale on the other end. And I said, there's absolutely not one thing that your core identity says that you should be a leader. Like just because you've been in a role or you've been successful at a role doesn't mean you're the right person to lead and manage. And that's really what changes what we're doing. So it's when we look at leaders, we look at dolphins and eagles as the main leaders. When we look at collaborators, it's more of the wolf and the octopus. And there's a lot of different factors below that, but just because of kind of where they fit in that drive and that desire to really take on those challenges.
well, I think you bring up a really good point here. What I find interesting, if you are the wrong person in the wrong role, two people or two entities are miserable. You, as the employer, are miserable because you just don't like your job and what you're being asked to do. And the company is miserable because you're not doing very well, right?
Exactly.
So, one of the biggest things that I find interesting about what you're doing is this myth busting of the idea just because you're the longest tenured person in that department doesn't mean you're going to be the better manager or the person that should be leading that department. I find it interesting. There's plenty of people that are really, 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 really good at sales. And then the company decides we're going to promote that person. And
Hmm.
that person, two things happen. A bad leader or a bad manager gets placed in a managerial role, and the number one salesperson just left the organization,
Exactly.
right? And then everybody's mad because how come the numbers went down? Well, you got a guy who's not really good or meant to be a leader, and he doesn't know what to do, or she's lost because that's not her core competency. So it's
And
interesting.
it's
This is a really good psychological piece, one, but it's a performance based piece, right? How do you perform when you're in the wrong role?
and one of my favorite things that I tell people is resumes are relics. Just because your
I like
resume
that.
says I did X does not mean that that's what you have to continue to do. I have an insanely weird background. I went to college on an English scholarship, which I love. I love to write. I still write every day. I write, I post on the blog at least a couple of times a week, sometimes every day. It just depends on
Yeah.
what's
When the mood so strikes you.
exactly, because I take what's happened in my life and I associate that to what's going on in the world or what's going on in business. And so I
Yeah.
think that that's an interesting approach versus just kind of putting statistics out there. That's never been the kind of person that I am. But so I had this English scholarship and then I started studying business because my intent was to go to law school. And I
Okay.
thought having an English and a business background would be a really great just foundation for that. By the
Yeah.
way, everybody I tell that to thinks that I'm insanely weird because I mean, you're on two separate sides of your brain.
Yeah. A little bit.
Um, I
Different
would make
track.
the exactly. I would have made the worst accountant ever. Not because I'm not intelligent, not because I can't do it, but because for me to sit down and follow a procedure every day is so outside of my core identity that that
Yeah.
consistency of wanting to follow steps 1 through 10 and then redo it every day is just not. I need excitement and change and chaos. I thrive in that. But for those people who don't, those are the right individuals who should be actuaries and accountants, doctors, even, and
Yep.
um, architects, people who need bakers. Like I joke
Mhm.
that I could never be a great baker. I can bake a couple of things, but because you have to precisely measure everything. And when I cook, it's like, oh, let's throw a little oregano in here. This is where we're going today.
That's a
Uh,
really good, okay. Because it's more scientific to be a baker than it is to be a chef.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. It matters. But so you look at that consistency and you look at kind of where that fits into your profile and who you are. And then you look at the last piece of it, which is the precision. And that doesn't mean that you're not precise. It means that are you an absolute rule follower, or are you someone who can live in the grayness?
Hmm.
And it's funny to me because, like I said, there's the world is black, the world is white, or the world is gray. And dependent upon the job you do in the organization, you need gray. And there are just some roles that don't fit
Yeah.
into that idea.
Well, let me ask you, which one are you? An eagle, dolphin, wolf, or octopus?
I am a dolphin.
Okay,
So
explain that real quick. What is it? What does that mean?
so my profile comes back as a persuader. And
Okay.
what it says to me is that I am a natural leader. I am driven to make direction. I'm very influential in what I do. And so I have a very high I.
Yep.
I have a very high S, so my desire to lead is high, my sociability is high, my consistency is my lowest, so which is that thriving in chaos. And it literally says on my form, I thrive in chaos,
Okay.
which you have to, because to be in sales and to be effectual in sales, you have to
Mhm.
be able to go into an account and not just say, I'm going to sell Scott this this piece of software today. You have to sit back and listen. I love when salespeople tell me when I coach them and they're like, well, I'm going to be great at sales because I can talk to anybody. But can you listen?
Yeah.
Because just because you can communicate doesn't mean you can sell. It means you can talk, right?
Yeah.
So if you can listen, then you hear the business need, and may have gone in and thought, I'm going to sell them X, Y, and Z. And after listening to what they really need, you're like, whoa, they actually need A, B, and C.
Yeah.
And so it's that ability to pivot. So people with low consistency have that natural ability to pivot. And then my precision swings back up, but it's more in that neutral range. So it says I can have that precision, but mm, it's below that neutral point. So it's still on the left-hand side. And what I tell people is if your P is on the left-hand side, you probably have a speeding ticket because you don't follow all of the rules. And if your P is on the right-hand side, you probably drive like 5 miles below the speed limit. And
Okay.
I have tested that philosophy and I've been right. So,
Okay. Uh, I have quit it. Okay. I'm on the right side, and I'm using right as if that's the justifiable side of the P. I know that. Car does
well,
not go slow.
you'll have to take the assessment and
Yeah.
we'll let you know
Yeah.
exactly where you land. But
I will. I look forward to it.
the
So,
idea is that you take the assessment, you get this core, and it doesn't say then from the core, okay, you belong in these roles. It says this is who you are at your core. Now, how does that compare to what you either want to do or what you are doing?
yeah.
And what I can tell you is that if you don't have a high I, you're not intended to be a leader. Doesn't mean you're not going to be great.
Mhm.
One of my favorite reps I've ever worked with at Twilio, I haven't tested him yet. I would love to. He had zero desire to ever be a leader. He won sales club every year. He was so great in front of a client. He could just knock the cover off the ball, but he only cared about his own success. He did not want to be in charge of anyone else's destiny but his own. And I respected him for that because he made it very clear that that's what he wanted,
Right.
right?
Well, it makes
So
it easier
he
to set expectations too.
exactly. He would have had a very very low I, but his social score was off the chain. He was energized from being around people. So he loved people. He just didn't want to lead them.
Yeah. And that's okay though, right? So when you
It's
find that
100%
person,
okay.
you know exactly where to place him, and that is as an IC in the front lines and go get stuff done. Okay.
And and
Now, I would imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I would imagine that person is exponentially easier to manage now that you know his core and what he's good at and what he's not so necessarily inclined to do. Then you can appeal to his natural core identity, which is I just need you to go contribute, but I need you to
yeah,
do it according to this, right? And he wants to because he's social, but he also has this high drive to go get things done because I wouldn't say selfish. He's just very in tune with what he wants.
well, so then what we do as coaches on this is we come in. not only do we now know your core, the tool has this proprietary AI built into it. So it's I joke that it's like having Brene Brown and Simon Sinek and all your top thought leaders
Yeah.
in one place. So we can go in and we can take existing environments. We can look at it and say, okay, build out a role, and this is what you're looking for. So we can help determine who you're going to hire. But once you've got an existing team, we can go in and test everybody, and then we say, all right, are you having any conflict? There's an ability for us to
Mhm.
put in the two different profiles and say, these two are having conflict, and their issue is communication, and it's leading to interpersonal issues, right? And from there, it'll then give us a script even as to how to coach their leader as
Oh
to how to
my.
deal with that. We can do it for the entire team. I can put an entire, like, do an assessment on everybody on the team and then create the team dynamics. And it'll tell me who has different skills, who should mentor whom, where people should
Awesome.
be in roles. So there's so much more to it than just the initial assessment that we can leverage. And so at Vetta, what we do is, like I said, we have made this partnership. We can go out and sell this solution, and then they get me every quarter to come in and help train their
Mm.
admins so that they're using the tool. Or they can have me on a much more regular basis where I come in and help coach either their leaders or their enablement team or their individuals. Or in addition to that, they can come in and have me sit down with leadership and say, this is what you have. Let's figure out your strategy for how you move
Yeah.
forward.
And how do you build your team off of that is not necessarily personal anymore. It's analytical. And it's
Analytical.
right. And it's driven from a foundation that says, this is what's going to prove to be the most successful. How do you want to manage this? Instead of, well, I really like Jim. I really like Sally. It's no, no, no. This is the best person for the role. And let's build the team around that concept as opposed to, well, they've been here for 17 years. We need to just keep them there or move them up or promote them, whatever. You're doing a much better job of analyzing the business need and filling it with the right people.
It's 100% correct. The other thing that's really interesting is, and I've interviewed hundreds, probably 1,000 people, maybe more. I don't know.
Yeah.
My brain might explode if I really thought about it over all this time. But some people are really good in the interview. They know the words to say, they know what you're
Mhm.
looking for, and then they're really bad at the job. So
Yeah.
just because they can articulate what you're looking for doesn't mean that's who they really are. It just means that they've learned how to play the game.
Yeah. Or they've been through a number of interviews and they've identified what gets you past this level to the next. And they've just honed their skill to the point where they're really good at BSing their way into an interview or into a job. And that's a sad part to be in because as a manager, you're trying to build the best team and you've got somebody that's not necessarily contributing to what you thought. It's a hard
Yeah.
thing to get through.
It's funny for me. I look back at my past. So I was a volleyball player when I was younger, and I coached club ball in my
Okay.
20s. And I never wanted to coach the number one team. I always wanted to coach the number two team. And people would say, why? And I say, because I've coached seventh and eighth grade girls, which,
Okay.
if you know anything about seventh and eighth grade girls, they're a lot. They
Hmm.
are, it's a lot of ego, it's a lot of attitude, it's just a lot.
A
And
lot of
so,
changes going on at that time.
yes, but I wanted the girls that were still coachable
Yeah.
and that I could teach them the skills, but you can't teach someone to be coachable. And that is one of the things that I think you find in these
Hmm.
assessments is that you can find out who is able to be coached, who's able to be kind of taken in a different direction. If you've got somebody who is way off the scale as an eagle, they're called enterprisers. Those people are entrepreneurs. They don't want to listen to anybody. Now, they're going to run their own company and probably rule the world, but they're not probably someone you want to put on a sales team because they are
Yeah.
not going to be happy taking direction from someone else. They want to take direction from them. They absolutely should be out there running their own world. Persuaders, challengers, mavericks, all phenomenal sales reps because they just are more inherently able to listen to the the changes that you may request from them
Okay.
and then put those into practice. And so I would laugh. My girls would they beat the number one team multiple times, But the two things that they would do is that they were always well conditioned because they were willing to do the work. And two, they understood that to be successful, because volleyball is a true team sport, they had to play together.
Yeah.
And so they they were able to do that. And I just kind of pivoted that into my sales career and into my leadership career and now into Vetta.
I love the idea, the analogy, because the ultimate team games always seem to produce the ultimate leaders of team because they understand what it takes to contribute and also what it takes to lead. You don't have to be a leader to contribute to the team. And I
Now,
think that gets
look,
lost.
I'm 5'4". People say, "Oh, so you were a setter, you were a libero." No, I was actually a hitter because I was tall as a sixth grader when they trained me into being a hitter. And so for me, I had to work twice as hard as anybody else in order to maintain that position because I was never going to grow anymore. And it was
Yeah.
hilarious when I'd walk out on the court, people would kind of look at me. Now, was I the number one player on the team? No, we had these rock star All-American players, but I was coachable and I was hardworking. And I knew that if I wanted to succeed, that I was going to have to put it out there every day. And that's
Yeah.
what I did. And that's kind of the mantra I've carried with me throughout the rest of my life.
I love it because it's very in tune with what we're trying to do here during the conversation. What is it, the lesson? What is it that you can teach people that they can carry on beyond just a normal conversation? It's all right, I actually can apply this to my business. You're talking about coaching a bunch of seventh and eighth grade girls and how you parlayed that into understanding yourself and how you can apply that to your own career and ultimately your own business. What are some of the other lessons that you think would be unbelievably valuable for somebody to learn?
That you don't know everything, that you have to constantly be learning.
Yeah.
And the world changes really fast. I mean, when I started in tech sales, I sold Pro Engineer and AutoCAD to on Alpha, Deck Alphas, HP kayaks, and IBM IntelliStations. But my first sales job, yes, we should put an asterisk so that I can tell people what those things are.
Okay.
But my first sales job, I sold long distance, and we laughed. I was having an interview with somebody, and the person that was interviewing me was in their early 30s, and she said, "I'm going to like put a notation in my guide to tell people what long distance is because if you're a certain age, you have no idea what that means."
Yeah.
And so as I went through my career, from starting from token ring to networking, to collaboration, to SaaS. I had to constantly be learning. And when we were learning in the 90s, there was no internet.
Yeah.
There was no chat GPT. You were reading books, you were talking to people, you were reading the manuals. My first technology field sales job, I sold Apple computers and Cisco networking, and we had to demo the computer. So
Okay.
it was the Apple G3 Molar Mac. You can look that up. It weighed 60 pounds
Oh, okay.
at, and I had to take it in and out of schools every day.
All right
Um,
then. 5'4". Okay. Not necessarily built for heavy lifting, but
it
65. I'm assuming it came on wheels.
it did not. I got a little trolley, I got a little luggage cart
Okay.
because the thing was half the size of me.
Yeah.
Um, and so I would, take that thing around. To put it in perspective, I have a MacBook in front of me right now. It weighs 2.7 pounds. So they've changed a little bit through the years.
A little
But
bit.
you had to learn. And my favorite story from that time is that this was Southern Indiana, and the librarians became the technology directors for the
Yeah.
schools. So, they went from the card catalog to, the
All
Dewey
of a sudden,
Decimal
yeah.
System to these computers, and they were trying to figure out how to use them. I get a call one day from, again, we'll protect the guilty and leave the names out of it, but from a technology director. And she was very upset with me. And she said, you left me these disks. I don't know how to load this software. I don't think that this is a good idea. I think we've wasted our money. And I said, I'll tell you what, I'll drive down tomorrow and I'll help you. So I got in my car and I drove down and I walked into her classroom because she was also a teacher. So she was the technology director and she was a teacher and she was leading the computers. And hand to God, she's sitting there in front of this thing with the disk tray out that the disk went in. with her coffee mug sitting in it.
Oh,
And I walked over to her and she was, a little flippant with me at first. And I picked up her coffee mug and I removed it and I put the disc in. I pushed the thing shut and the program started to load. And she looked at me and she said, "We will never discuss this again." I'm like, that's how you do
all
it.
right. All right.
But
Sometimes it just takes a little bit of nudging. That's all.
I I would never have thought that someone would have thought that it came with a cup holder, right? But that was
Yeah.
in her mind, it was a cup holder.
You got to think about it. Clearly has no exposure to what computers were at that time. And I'm remembering back, what kind of cup holder or mug would you have that would fit into that where you would think that that's a cup holder? But we'll let that slide. It goes back to your statement of constantly learning. Okay, constantly learning what other people are capable of, pivoting your skill set to match what is necessary. That is a huge piece of what lessons you've learned, and I think it'd be
Mm.
helpful for people to learn that. That's
Yeah. And
crazy.
then another one that I would put on there, and I probably had to learn this one even more, um, was putting your ego aside.
Okay.
So, I also like the book Positive Intelligence. And Positive Intelligence talks about all your different saboteurs and your sages. And my biggest saboteur is high achiever. And it doesn't mean that you can't want to be an achiever. It meant that I really, really fed on the acknowledgement of that, the
Mhm.
promotions, the titles,
Yeah.
the president's clubs, the commission checks. And when I went out on my own and created this company, there was nobody there that was going to, I wasn't getting the call out on the all hands call every week, and I wasn't getting the stock awards. And I joke that my boss now is she's a little tight with the budget. She doesn't give me, she's a little stingy, but
Yeah. But her vision is solid and she knows where
her
she's
vision is
going.
solid. So it was really funny to me to have to think about that and just put my ego to the side and say, that is not who that that's not what made me successful. Those were great perks. And as someone who has been on both sides of having money and not having money, trust me, I can tell you having money makes life a lot easier, but it's really not what drove me. I
Hmm.
decided that being out and helping people and engaging with them and helping them take their vision and get to success was really what made me feel rewarded, and that the money and the benefits were all great, but
Okay.
that wasn't the drive.
Couple of things here. First, I want to say what a coincidence that putting your ego aside and constantly learning are your two lessons that you want people to know and feel good about. Think about the coincidence of those two things. How much are you going to learn if your ego is always front and center? You can't learn anything. So, to your point, put your ego aside and learn and constantly find ways to do things differently. That's a huge way of, that's a huge thought process there. Like it a lot. The
Yeah,
other thing, just kind of going through what you just said, being your own boss is not an easy thing to do, but it's the most rewarding thing you can ever accomplish, right? And if you set yourself up for success, you will be successful. Stop thinking about the negative stuff. Stop thinking about what could go wrong. Think about what's going to happen and how positive that's going to change your life and those lives around you. I think that's awesome. That's what I love about being a business owner is it's so much
yeah,
more than money because eventually if you present your value and people really engage with you, the money follows because you're doing the
agreed.
right thing and people understand it. And what I like about what I do, and I'm sure you echo this, I don't sell anything that somebody does not want, need, or have to have in their life to be successful. It's just part of what they want, need, or have to be successful. I'm not pushing anything. You decide to work with me. I'm not pushing you to work with me. I'm assuming the same thing happens for Vetta. It's not for everybody, but for those people that want to do this, it's an incredible ride and you'll make a, you get to be really successful when you get a chance to do things the right way.
I agree with that. And it's interesting to me because I said to someone, I've told people no, I'm not the right person to work with. I've stepped away from clients that I really like that I didn't feel like I was being as impactful for them as I wanted
Mhm.
to. And there's a variety of reasons for that. But the people who get it, the people who are really engaging, then they see that bigger picture and that their success then watching them flourish, that's
Yeah.
beyond. That's just the great part about it. And it's I spent a long time, and I loved my career, and I've loved it, and I've worked really hard, and I've worked for some really amazing leaders, and I've worked for some really bad leaders. But I'm grateful for the past that I've had and for everything that I've been able to take from it. And it's so interesting to me to say that I can look back and see who was impactful in my life. And I hope that some of the people that I've been able to work with, both individually and as companies, will in a few years be able to look back and go, well, Amy really, really impacted us in a
Yeah.
great way there.
Well, something that I think you're right. And that's, you think about your core identity plus your experiences, give you a tremendous amount of wisdom and opportunity for success. And if you kind of piece those things together, then you're unstoppable,
Yeah,
right? Especially if you
exactly.
know your core and this is what I'm good at and this is what I feel good about doing, and I tie it to what I've experienced, man, how could anybody stop you? That's awesome.
Yeah.
One last question. We've got like 3 minutes, I think. One last question. I'm going to put you in a time machine and send you back, and you're going to find 18-year-old Amy, and you get a chance to sit on a park bench. What is that conversation going to be?
Oh, I would love to talk to 18-year-old Amy. And we're only going to take it from a professional standpoint, not from a personal one. But
Whatever you want
I,
to say.
I would tell her, number one, to not be afraid of taking risks. That there were times in my life that I listened to the naysayers around me, and I didn't leap. I didn't take the leadership position
Mhm.
earlier enough. I didn't take the opportunity into the different roles or the different companies. So I would tell her not to be afraid to take risks, number one. I, even though I did have a successful career, I would have told her to get your graduate degree early on because I think that
Okay.
that would have been both impactful to me, expanding my knowledge, but also to just, it was something I regret never doing. And now I could go back and do an executive one now, but really,
Yeah, there's no
I'm
need.
not there. But most importantly, I would tell her my favorite thing that I've learned, which is, um, I'd rather have 4 quarters than 100 pennies, meaning that n- it
Okay.
the 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 quality of people matter over the quantity,
Okay.
and that you are gonna think that you need to surround yourself with a lot of people and become a pleaser and change yourself and become a chameleon for these people to like you, and you are enough just as you are, and you
Love
are
that.
good, and the people who you really, really want in your life will be there, but you don't need a whole bunch of them. 4 quarters and 100 pennies equal the same dollar, but it's the quality over the quantity.
I, Amy, I love that. I've never heard that before, and that is a great analogy for people to understand. Your sphere of influence or your sphere of friends needs to be as close as you want it to be. And one of the things I wrote down when you were saying, um, don't listen to the naysayers and take risk earlier, I wrote down, don't listen to those that have their own best interests in mind over yours. Because
Yeah,
what is that old story about the crabs in a bucket, right? No crab wants to see another crab climb out of the bucket, so they all tear it down or bring it down. Why are you listening to people that don't want you to be successful? Go
yeah.
find new friends and pay attention to who are going to be those 4 quarters in your life. Because 100 pennies, probably not going to be in your best interest.
Well, and it could be your friends, it could be your family, it could be your educators, it could be your bosses. I mean,
Yeah.
who were the ones that were telling you no, and they were doing so because of their own agenda. And so just take that step, listen to what your heart is telling you, and move forward. But yes, those 4 quarters, that is an Amyism. I have said that for a really
I
long
love it.
time.
I'm going to
You may
steal it,
use it.
and that is going to be the headline of your description in this video. That's great.
I love that.
I want to thank you for being a part of this. This has been a really insightful conversation. I think you brought a lot of good stuff to the table. I want everyone to get a chance to check your website out, understand this assessment that you do. So all the information will be in the description down below, so they'll get a chance to see that. Other than that, I want to thank you for being on the show, and we'll see everybody again on the next episode of the Legacy Leaders. Thanks.
Thank you so much.